All right, we are live. Welcome to the Deconstructing Data podcast. I'm Jessie Lezak, CMO at BDEX, along with co-host Joshua Morgan, BDEX marketing extraordinaire, and of course, David Finkelstein, BDEX's co-founder and CEO. Today's guest is Nina Wornhoff. Nina is the senior data scientist at Change Research, where she leads the data science team and is responsible for building custom models, predictive analysis, and polling methodology. An experienced political campaigner as well, Nina held analytics roles on the Biden campaign, DNC Tech team, Pete Buttigieg presidential campaign, and numerous state and local campaigns in her home state of Indiana, which I lived in briefly. But you're with Change Research now, and I was reading a little bit about it, so I wanted to share with the audience because it's a pretty neat story. So Change Research was co-founded by Mike Greenfield and Pat Riley. So Mike was the first data scientist at both PayPal and LinkedIn, and starting running his own political opinion poll online in 2017. So, and then at that same time, Pat, she was a seasoned political professional who ran her own communications firm. She joined a network of tech executives to surface Silicon Valley solutions to improve civic engagement. So Mike and Pat bonded over a shared sense of urgency, both as parents to advance the humane and scientific world. And they were surprised by the state of polling. So high costs, long turnaround times, inaccuracy, and a lack of innovation. So that is kind of what inspired it. And it seems like you guys have done a lot since then. So 800 polls to date for campaigns, media and causes at all different levels, all different budgets. So surveying nearly 2 million people, I was reading. And you guys have even won some pretty impressive awards that all kind of reflect on your accuracy. So that is also really, really interesting. So it sounds like Change Research is precise, and we love talking about data precision. So if anyone in the audience has any questions throughout this discussion, feel free to plug those into the comments. But thank you so much for being here, Nina. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. And would you mind, could you please start from the beginning and tell us your story and what inspired you to get into political data science?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, from the time I was a kid, I've always really been interested in politics. My family is very political. My mom was on the school board growing up. She ran for mayor when I was in college. Politics was just something we really talked about a lot. That was a big part of our family culture and something I was really interested in. So when I went to college at Indiana University, I studied political science and math, and was always just loved the politics side of things. I'm very ideologically driven and motivated by supporting progressive causes and ideals, and was also always good at and really enjoyed math. So those two things were able to come together, and I got plugged into the Democratic kind of data world. So from working on campaigns in Bloomington, Indiana, and working on a lot of state and local races, to spending a lot of time in Washington, D.C. I was able to intern at the DNC on the tech team, and a couple other exciting organizations out in D.C., and kind of just get to know the space and learn a lot along the way. And I've always really loved campaigns. So when Pete Buttigieg announced he was running for president as a Hoosier, that was really, really exciting to me. And I was able to join that campaign when it was about 30 people in 2019, and around April of 2019, and was on that team, helped build out a team of about 30 data and engineering folks. And by the end of the campaign, there were 2,000 people on staff total in about a year. So a really amazing opportunity and experience to scale a huge team and have a really big impact. And then jumped on the Biden campaign to help out for the last 4 or 5 months of the cycle, and then made my way to Change Research, which is a really wonderful place that helps campaigns up and down the ballot have access to this public opinion data and get an accurate and fast read on what voters actually think in this specific moment. The world's a crazy place right now, and it's always important to test how test messaging, test what people are feeling in the specific moment that you're running a campaign in. And we're able to do that quickly and cheaply and help people, and most importantly, accurately. So that's a lot of what we're focused on at Change Research now.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's great, Nina. So great to meet you. And I love how you sort of found your path between the combination of politics and math. I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't even make the connection between the two. And you found sort of your place in the world by connecting the two. And I think that's pretty cool. So, as Jesse mentioned, I'm the co-founder and CEO of BDEX. And I've kind of found my path with respect to looking at things similarly, in the sense that I, always enjoyed sort of data, but also intrigued by marketing and advertising. And so, we primarily, help consumer brands, marketing agencies, and now political organizations as well understand their audiences and target those audiences through advanced techniques with identity resolution, machine learning, data as a service, obviously data being the core to all of that for us. I think it'd be interesting to see where this conversation takes us. As Jesse said, precision is super important to us. And additionally, data quality is our standard. So advertisers today face so much noise and bad data. So we help them cut through that, all that bad data out there, and find what's good. And so I'm interested in hearing your perspective on what you think the biggest challenges are for political candidates, what they face in regards to collecting, analyzing quality first-party data, and how the best campaigns reducing the noise, how their best campaigns are reducing the noise from the bad data.
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, political campaigns are kind of an interesting context because on the one hand, it's a really simple problem. You're trying to get more votes than anyone else, and that's it. That's pretty much the entire goal. But obviously, once you dig in a little bit, that there's so much more complexity there. And then additionally, when you register to vote, which is the only way you can cast your vote in a lot of states, when you show up on election day, that list of everyone who's registered to vote is available to campaigns. So we actually do have a list of every voter who basically has the ability to elect or not elect you on election day. But there are huge problems with that data. It is, as you said, data quality is always an enormous issue, and it's often really out of date. People move, people change their names, people make typos, people have bad handwriting. There are a ton of different things there. And obviously not everything centers around the voter file. When you go to target ads on Facebook, when you go to make calls to voters, when you knock on doors, that's not necessarily all stemming from the voter file. And being able to do that identity resolution and figure out who, if this Joshua Morgan is the same Joshua Morgan who responded to a survey, is a really complicated problem, and having that understanding is hard. So polling is a really great tool to kind of get that fresh data from voters. It's really hard to have kind of faith in the quality of data you're getting from anywhere. And the best way to do it is to hear directly from voters themselves, who are self-identifying as people who are going to be voting in your election, and to understand what that looks like. And we have spend a lot of our time making sure that we're reaching the right people who are going to be representative of who's actually going to turn out to vote on election day. So those are that's kind of the core problem with challenge of polling are the people who are answering your surveys the type of people who are going to be voting, and are they representative? It's hard to make sure that you're not just getting like the hyper engaged people who are spending all their time thinking about politics, because those are not the everyday voters who are going to win and lose elections. So it's making sure that you have kind of that well-rounded understanding of the electorate, and even the people who aren't going to be volunteering on campaigns every day, but they're still going to turn out to vote, and making sure that you have ways to reach them. And whether that's the main way we would do that is by recruiting through online advertising through Facebook, and then also some text to web as well, where we text people a link to take our surveys. So that kind of helps us target a geography and make sure that everyone who is eligible to vote in that area can come into our surveys and tell us what they think.
Yeah, it's interesting. In fact, to your point, probably trying to reach some of the less engaged people is more important than those highly engaged people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of, at first glance, I think a lot of people might assume that might worry about reaching people who aren't going to actually vote in elections. But it turns out, the people who are taking a lot of surveys and people who want to take surveys it's not random. Like the people who are more engaged in civically in turning out in elections, those are survey takers, and that's not just a random group of people. So what we worry about the most is, or something I worry about a lot at least, is making sure that we're reaching those voters who might not vote every time, but they're still going to make up a large portion of the electorate.
So I love stories. I love storytelling. And so I have had a blast listening to some of the stories that Jessie has when she was working in Iowa for the Democratic Party back in 2008. And so I would love to hear a story or two that you have found that has been like interesting with your experience and, the political campaign experience.
Yeah. I think the Iowa caucus in 2020 was a really, really insane time. I think a lot of people heard about it, but basically the Iowa Democratic Party kind of tried out a new app to record their caucus results. Caucuses are a pretty funny way of electing people. Most people will probably never experience them, but basically at 6 p.m. on a Monday night in February, everyone in Iowa the only way you can cast your vote is by going to a gym or a church basement. It's kind of like your polling location. And you stand around for often like 2-3 hours and basically kind of go stand in the corner where your candidates' people are standing. And that's how you vote. And it's always been a crazy process, but basically they tried to do this and added a piece of technology that wasn't really ready for prime time, and that meant that we had no results the night of the caucus. We had no results until the middle of the next day.
This happened in 2020?
This happened in 2020.
Okay, because I'm pretty sure it was 2012 because I went back in 2012.
Yeah,
and we had something similar happen.
Yeah, and and if you read back, I think in maybe 2008 on the Republican side, they announced the wrong winner of the caucus, and it's 3 weeks later.
Technology. I mean, literally, you're putting people in a gym and they're like standing in a corner, and then you have people like trying to collect that data and send it to pollsters and like other political apps.
Yeah, it's a really crazy process. But we ended up basically on the fly having to figure out, we had a whole process ready for how we were going to spin the different results, how we were going to the different stories we were going to be telling that night. And it turned out we just had no data. So on the fly, we had to basically build and come up with a new system for trying to figure out what these results actually were by relying on a network of hundreds of volunteers at these, 1,600 different locations throughout the state of Iowa, sending us pictures of pieces of paper and having people transcribe these into spreadsheets and posting them publicly on our website. I think for a good part of those 48 hours, our campaign website was the most reliable place to get that data. And it was a lot of not sleeping for a long time. There were some rule changes that were made on the fly. There was a lot of real craziness. And I think it was really challenging. And, I think, for the record, Pete Buttigieg did win the Iowa caucus. He got more delegates than anyone else. And that is how you win the nomination in these situations. But no one knew. And we couldn't make that call confidently for days. And in this sequential primary system, we, had to go on, and the candidate had to fly to New Hampshire and be focused on that next contest. But it was a really, really crazy time. And that was a very wild experience that was, both really, really exciting and also unbelievably frustrating at the time. But it was a crazy time. So, yeah.
What's always interesting because they're like,
Crazy.
the results are in. Kind of, not really, but they are, but you're going to have to wait. So there's kind of this forecast of kind of the expectation, but sometimes it doesn't always. So there's kind of this like roller coaster of like emotions going into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in 2020, the Iowa caucus was unbelievably close. There are like state delegates that are elected that determine the winner, and I think there are thousands of them, and we won by I think like 4.2 delegates. It was unbelievably close, and in 2016 it was also extremely close between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders as well. So it's crazy how these, how close it can be even and consistently when in these contests.
Absolutely. And data is key. And when you don't have data, you're kind of put into the dark.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't have any stories to tell.
Is it Buttigieg? I always like it.
Buttigieg.
Yeah. So kind of what is your experience with data on like his campaign and Biden's campaign in terms of like targeting for paid media campaigns?
Yeah, so I primarily worked on the paid media side of things on the Buttigieg campaign. That was a different team that was very, very good at their jobs on the Biden campaign that I wasn't a part of. But with a national campaign, your focus is really around kind of geographic resource allocation because of the way the electoral college is set up. And with these delegate systems, you really only care about getting the plurality of the votes. You don't get extra points for winning by a lot. You really just want to get to 50%. And any dollar you spend getting to 51, 52, 53% is kind of waste. So it's this interesting optimization problem where you're really focused on just shoring up, getting past that 50% margin. And so with TV buys and digital ad buys, that was the main focus, is making sure that we were maximizing the impact per dollar of those things. And obviously with digital ads, we had the ability to target really precisely where we were going to be reaching people, which is a huge benefit. With TV, you're working with media markets, which are kind of arbitrary lines that definitely don't align with political lines. So there we were always trying to focus on like, okay, we're really trying to focus on Florida here, but it's going to be overlapping a little bit into Georgia, and that's okay because we also care about Georgia a lot. But in other places, Ohio is going to be competitive, but unfortunately, Indiana is not going to be that competitive. So we don't want to spend money overlapping and spilling over into Indiana. So there were different situations where you're having to think through all those different things. But really, we were always focused on that, on making sure that we were reaching the right people geographically, and then separately have different messages that were focused on different communities to make sure that they understood what these candidates and what these policies were going to be doing for those communities. So different demographic breakdowns have different priorities about when they're casting their vote, and making sure that we're speaking to the right thing to the right people is always a priority.
Well, awesome. So one more question for you. What would you say are your like 3 to 5, say, biggest takeaways from working on Buttigieg's campaign, Biden's campaign, and then like the DNC team tech campaigns?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that the team is always the most important thing. In these situations, things are changing really quickly, and basically, on the Buttigieg campaign, I had like 4 different jobs over the course of a year. The teams are growing, things are changing, and having people who are going to be able to roll with those changes and perform well in all of those different situations is what's most important. People who are going to learn quickly, people who are going to prioritize kindness, and these really high stress situations is really important. Like no one's good enough at their job to be mean. Like that just doesn't work, especially in these high stress situations. So that's I think the number one thing. And then also you have to move quickly. That's another big thing. You can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And it's always better to have something quickly than to have the perfect thing 3 weeks late. And making sure that you can quickly understand what's happening to be able to make those initial right decisions. Even if it's not perfect, to be able to get on the right track early on is such an important priority. And then also like trust the experts. I think we always want to have data to be able to back up every decision. But if you don't have data, you shouldn't just throw your hands up. You should ask someone who's done this before. You should ask people who are experts. They're experts for a reason, and they're gonna put you on the right track. And down the road, you can get the data you need to kind of, maybe refine that take or refine those decisions. But making sure that you're trusting the people who have done this before and are experts is always really important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those were all great questions, Josh. And building off of it, Nina, in terms of the data you had access to in your previous and current role, what do you think could help you the most or could have helped you the most? Is there a particular data segment that it was like, wow, I wish we had this, then we would have known something? I mean, besides like the Iowa caucus and like trying to like, tally up voters. But like when it comes to, targeting people, what could have helped you?
Yeah, I think one of the kind of core data set that we always wish we had is a list of unregistered voters. Being able to really find those people who maybe just haven't thought about voting in the past. Maybe they moved recently. Maybe they just became eligible and no one told them like, hey, you have to go register to vote. And being able to give those people the information of it's not hard to vote and it's so important. And here's how you can participate. And here's the steps you have to go through is always something we're looking for and trying to find more ways to build out more complete lists of those unregistered voters so we can reach them and help them understand how they can participate in the process. And then one of the things that was really amazing that we did on the Buttigieg campaign was we used Mechanical Turk to basically collect like really fast, cheap survey responses in really important moments. So during a debate or after a big news event, just getting a couple hundred survey responses really quickly that weren't the highest fidelity survey responses. They weren't something we were gonna bet the house on, but to get a quick pulse check on something, to know what to be able to make those quick decisions was really amazing. And in a lot of ways, that was kind of like a lower fidelity version of what Change Research does, collecting these online survey responses to try and quickly and cheaply understand what's happening so that you can make those decisions instead of having to, with a more traditional pollster, maybe it's often more like a weeks-long process of writing a survey, reserving time in a call house, and going through the process of like calling a lot of voters. And it's not really the same. And often the moment has passed. So that was a really, really valuable thing. And then also just the wealth of data that the DNC has invested in putting together for Democratic campaigns up and down the ballot to use is really phenomenal. The DNC Tech team has made enormous strides in the last couple cycles, and so that people from your local school board to Joe Biden are all building off of one another's data is really, really incredible. And that kind of compounding data asset is one of those things that just you have to have a central organization to be maintaining and building on. And that's something that has really, really made our campaigns much more successful over the last 5 or 10 years.
And are you referring to sort of the work done out of like NGP Van?
Yeah. So that's kind of the front end for it, but the data itself is housed and owned by the DNC and is most often accessed through NGP Van, but is also accessible through any database and through a lot of different other tools in the progressive industry.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So like Nation Builder might be an equivalent with that.
Yeah. Nation Builder, a lot of different kind of field tools, things like like through talk, things like Mobilize, these different tools that let you kind of reach voters in more effective ways, whether you're calling them, texting them, knocking on doors, having conversations with your friends, those kinds of things.
Okay, got it. Interesting.
I think it's cool that you use the Mechanical Turk to get, sort of on the fly voter insights, pulling information. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Good use of it. Definitely a different use of it. So I'm curious to hear what your team is finding themselves working on most this election season. Would you say there are more efforts going into understanding and analyzing your target audience? Are you finding more attention being paid to building custom models, predictive analysis, or polling? Where's that the biggest effort?
Yeah. Well, our top priority is always supporting kind of the core polling operations that are the core business at Change Research. So making sure that we're reaching the right voters and getting the right people into our surveys. So again, we use Facebook in that ad platform extensively, and that is always a little bit of a moving target. So we are consistently testing and keeping an eye on who's coming into our surveys and making sure that it's the people who need to be represented there. So that's a lot of what we're doing, and also just kind of the general maintenance. We are a small team. There's one other person on the data science team at Change Research, so there's a lot of balls that we're keeping up in the air to support that core work. We're also doing, through our kind of non-political arm and Bold Research, a lot of work with different energy organizations, different corporate organizations, different government clients, to make sure that they have what they need. And that is kind of a different class of work that's focused on people who aren't just registered voters, and using more census data, using more consumer data to make sure that we're reaching the people who need to be reached for that work as well. So that's some of what we're doing. I think especially in the world is like, the world's kind of a crazy place right now. Has been for a little while, but continues to be. And especially with, the recent Supreme Court decisions, which with overturning Roe v. Wade, a lot of people are kind of re-digging into those really core questions as things are changing, to see how can we talk to voters about this effectively? How can we help them understand what we can and can't do, and what the different candidates are going to be pushing for if they're elected? So digging into those things. And then we are doing a lot of custom modeling work right now. So having a model that's built for your specific needs and your specific situation and how you're going to be using it can really help your efforts be so much more cost effective, and usually pays for itself extremely quickly. So that's another class of work that we're doing for a lot of different candidates right now.
Oh, that's really cool.
Great. Yeah.
So sort of switching gears, Nina and David. So today we released VDEX's 2022 Political Advertising Sentiment Survey, collected from 260 voters. And the results, here's what they show. So we had 77.7% of respondents report TV news and social media are their primary sources for political news. However, 76.5% of respondents report that they tend to tune out or ignore political ads in the media. These results indicate only 1% of survey respondents are paying attention to political ads on TV and social media. So then we had 51.9% of respondents say they watch specific news channels and read from certain publications for political coverage. So knowing all of this, what can campaigns do to target their audiences deterministically to reach them at the right time in the right place?
Yeah, I think this is the big question in a lot of ways. But I think one thing is creative is unbelievably important. You can spend a lot of time optimizing the audience you're targeting, but if you're not saying the right thing in the right way with the right messenger, it's not going to land. And that's how you can get those kind of big step function increases in efficiency and impact. And that's making sure that you're testing creative extensively. You're doing the work through focus groups, through qualitative research, and through survey research to test messages and understand what people care about. helps make sure that people aren't tuning things out. And then also, obviously, I think a lot of people, us, probably many of us included, are tuning out a lot of the ads we see on a daily basis. But it's not just about kind of what ads you're looking at. It's also about, like, even if I don't look at an ad, if my mom or my friend sees an ad and then posts about it on Facebook, or sends me a text about it, or brings it up the next time we have lunch, like those kind of downstream effects can be really important and can make an impact on, and that can often be where the real persuasion happens. And then also for kind of these deeper persuasion conversations, I think politics is very polarized in a lot of ways, and a lot of people aren't probably going to change their minds about these core values issues because of a Facebook ad. It's really important to have these deep conversations with the people in your life. It's about having those relational conversations and talking to the person in your life who you maybe don't agree with on everything, but trying to help them understand where you're coming from and why you're supporting the candidate you're supporting, and having that. So that's a thing a lot of campaigns are really encouraging volunteers to do. Instead of just calling strangers, talk to the people in their lives about what they care about, why they care about politics, and why they care about supporting the candidates they're supporting. So that's another really important thing. But with change research, I think one of the things that's interesting about our work and is really different is we're not actually trying to convince people of anything with our ads. We're not trying to change people's minds. We're just trying to understand where they are at that moment and gather information. So we're not trying to optimize for cost per completes. We're trying to get the most representative sample and just get people in the door. So that's an interesting thing that I think is pretty different from how pretty much everyone else uses ads. It's not about convincing someone to change their mind or to take action. It's about getting someone to tell us what they think at that moment, which is pretty different.
Yeah, that's cool. Collecting qualitative data. So David, what do you think about that article we released today? It got published in, I think, Media Post. So I was excited to see that. But in terms of like what campaigns can do to make sure they're reaching the right people at the right time, what would you say? You're on mute, David.
Sorry about that. One of the things that Nina just said, I thought was, something that was mentioned in the survey that we did, which was the fact that people are more persuaded by people within their own network. And I don't remember what the statistic was on that. There was a number there. And I find that super interesting because I think it's super important for people to, from a political advertising standpoint, to recognize that really their goals really should not be necessarily to be persuading people, but to get them to talk about the issues, because as they talk about the issues, they share that with their network, and that's how they influence, more of a mass of people rather than just one individual. So I think that that's an interesting perspective when it comes to political advertising that a lot of people we haven't seen a lot in the past. Political advertising that is specific to an issue, tied to an audience, or targeted to an audience that is concerned about that issue, because just getting them to talk about it, that's what works, right? The more the politician talks, the less people listen. The more your people in your network talk, the more you listen, right? So I think that is an approach that they need to think about in political advertising going forward. And I think we'll see a lot more of that in this coming political season, for sure.
Yeah, I think anytime that we can get our politicians talking less is a good thing sometimes. But
it's true.
Yeah. So thinking about your work over at the Change Research Centers, and it's around using survey methodology to help candidates and organizations to reach voters most effectively, what tips do you have on that data application?
Yeah. Well, first I would say the pollsters who are actually working with clients and designing these surveys are incredible experts. They have so much experience figuring out what questions to ask, understanding your needs, and then also being able to dig into this really large amount of data and pull out the things that are most important. So working with an expert on this is so valuable, and listening to them and really engaging with them is one of the most important things you can do. And we have a team of really incredible people from a ton of different backgrounds who are able to do this. And then I think one of the great things about us is we're able to kind of get into the field really quickly. I think maybe a week or two ago, had a client who was like, hey, we need results in like the next 48 hours. And we were able to basically immediately write the survey, get it into the field, and get top line results to them really quickly. So that kind of agility helps people be able to make those decisions quickly when there are those moments that are, they come rarely, but they're really important to capitalize when they come along. And then making sure that you're using those results to drive decisions, and also kind of knowing going in, like what levers do we have to pull? How much money do we have to spend? How are we going to spend it? What are the different things we can do? So whether that's producing the best type of creative to get it out there, whether that's having a broad set of creative that can be targeted at different audiences separately, whether that's finding the thing that's going to appeal to the most people, and making sure that you kind of know what the end is going to look like, and what things you're going to be able to optimize is really, really important. So I think those are some of the things that I'd focus on. And then also just, it's always like, this is not unique advice, but like being authentic to voters. Like people can tell when politicians are just like spouting the same thing over and over again, and really, really being authentic about like what you care about, why you're in this, and what your campaign's fighting for is really important.
It's all good. Thanks for sharing. So this question is for both Nina and David. I'll start with Nina. And we primarily target, B2C marketers. And we're targeting and trying to understand, audiences that are trying to consume products and services, not necessarily political content. But so I'm curious, we ask a lot of people, what B2C marketers can learn from B2B marketers and vice versa. And so I'm curious to know, what do you think B2C marketers could learn from political campaign operatives?
Yeah.
And vice versa, what political operatives might be able to learn from B2C marketers? Yeah.
I think the thing that like campaigns are best at doing is just moving quickly. It's always out of necessity. Always the resource you're shortest on is always time on a campaign. You have this very, very strict, immovable deadline of an election day, and that's kind of it. And really making sure that you're not letting perfect be the enemy of good, and that you're just getting started from somewhere and being willing to make changes along the way, I think is really important, and something that campaigns, tend to be good at. And I think that's something that we generally do a good job of.
And then what about the other way around? What do you think that political campaign operatives could learn from B2C marketers?
I think the value of testing is like obviously so important. I think it's much less industry standard to be, continuously A/B testing things, both with different creative and also among different audiences, and making sure that rigorous testing is just built into everything you do. It's so valuable. It saves you so much, saves you money. It makes things work better. And that's something that often like we don't have the systems set up for.
Yeah, makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar actually, because if it seems to me that brands, when it comes to B2C marketing, spend a lot of effort A/B testing, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, whether it's with respect to targeting or creative, even down to, the little nitty gritties of what's included in the creative. Do I put a dog in it? Do I put a cat in it? Oh, I need a dog for this audience. I need a cat for this audience. And whatever it is, I would even say it's A/B testing. It's like A, B, C, D, E all the way through. A lot of times on the B2C side. And like Nina said, I don't think that there's the time, right, on the political campaign side to really do all of that. Maybe that will change over time because, as technology advances, we're able to do a lot of that stuff on the fly a lot more. So it may be interesting to see that over time, maybe political campaigns will be able to do more of that because it'll all happen so quickly on the fly. Going the other way around, as far as what B2C could learn, I think it's interesting from the political side. What you were talking about is how time is never on your side. I think that on the B2C side, they always feel like they have a lot of time, right? Time is definitely on their side in that sense. Like there's plenty of time to figure out what to do with this campaign or that campaign. But I think that in the political environment, they're able to do so much so fast and get results because of that time pressure. And so I feel almost sometimes like the B2C side needs to work as if they had that time pressure, because they could probably achieve a lot faster and reach goals faster if they had that kind of time pressure and didn't sort of have the luxury of time.
Absolutely. That really resonates because I started my career in politics and then went to tech startups. And I think that working under that time pressure actually ended up helping me quite a bit because I had this sense of urgency that I think helped me succeed quite a bit. So I think you're absolutely right, David. In B2B and B2C in terms of having that sense of urgency. But yeah, so we still have a lot of questions, but speaking of time, we're running out of time. So David, Josh, do you both want to pick one more question before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I have one more. So for Nina, so I know some businesses are starting to panic, obviously, about a recession and are adjusting their budgets to focus more on data and efficiency. Do you see any trends towards the increased use of data due to the recession, or still, even as we evolve from the pandemic? If so, what ways on the political side?
Yeah. On the political side, we're obviously operate kind of more on campaign cycles and electoral cycles than anything. So everyone's really ramping up for the midterm elections right now, and that's the big focus, and is not as held to the kind of economic constraints. But on some of our more corporate and non-political clients are definitely thinking about this, as is everyone. I think some of the things that we talk about a lot is just the cost of running inefficient programs when you're flying blind is so high, and having effective targeting that's informed by survey research and modeling in some situations is just pays for itself so quickly. So I think that's something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of, and making sure that people are spending those dollars effectively, and not just kind of throwing out a smaller budget, and making sure that they're using the budget effectively.
Definitely.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, in closing, we would love to get input from listeners about what or who you would like to hear on the Deconstructing Data podcast. What topics would you like to cover? And are there any guests you think we should talk to? We'd love to hear from you. Send us your qualitative feedback to info@bdex.com. But thank you so much for talking with us, Nina. This was a really interesting conversation. I feel like we probably could have talked for a couple more hours. So I'm bummed that it's already 5:00. So I guess thanks for that.
Thank you all. It was really, really great to talk.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, take care.